don't know if you know me, but just got banned on TikTok. So I'll tell you about myself or reveal myself if I haven't already to you. But I want to talk about where we are in society. How the hell did we get here? It's a biblical equation that we're dealing with, quite frankly. So let's talk about that. Let's go back to the beginning of time that we have recorded the first written letters, right? Why? It was because they were accounting. It was the Hammurabi's Code. In Hammurabi's Code, it set up tiers in society that honestly are used by the elites to justify today the way that they stratify our society. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. So we have Hammurabi's Code. Interest rates in that code are 1 shekel per 20 something. It ends up being 20%. So interest rates over time have gone down. The Romans, the Greeks, they had a coin system. They didn't really have debt. They mostly acquired resources, had coin, traded that. Until you get to the 1500s, you don't really see the big lending system that starts really dominating modern economics. So capitalism, in some sense, is birthed out of credit, and Venice during the Renaissance essentially birthed credit. So interest rates then were down at like 4 or 5%, actually pretty low, even in the long-term trend. But since then, the 1700s, there was another reserve currency. The dominant power then was England. And then we had a revolution. Then we're basically trading with them throughout, all of the wars in Europe. And it's basically been one giant developing economic story, right? We're all reading the same story. We're all reading the same Bible, right? Ultimately, we've got to decide why we are setting up our societies the way that we are. Jesus came around during the Romans, and we have 4 generations where it's just like spoken word, where there's things like Jesus is our only son, and God gave us his only son. But then also in another part, it says we're all God's children. So these little fragments have been used over time to justify these institutions that I don't think speaks to what Jesus would have wanted. And building a society top down the way that Jesus wouldn't have wanted. I'm an anarchist, and I believe that Jesus was an anarchist. Did he believe that there wasn't power that was God-given and competition couldn't, that's a little bit of a paraphrase, but I believe that Jesus believed in competition. He said that there will be poor people. There has to be poor people. Jesus was not a communist, but what is he saying? Money is not the solve of anything. It's only a proxy. It sounds right. It sounds what Adam Smith came up with in the 1700s, where he said that basically all of these resources we're trading, it's all for consumption. The true value of anything is the labor that we put into being able to consume later, and you can derive through the logic of that. You can put your time into money. You can use money to make your time better, but you can't take time back out and make it, of money. So that's the credit thesis. If I give you money now, you're going to give me more in the future. Those interest rates have existed. Compound interest has led to basically every, boom bust cycle. But we're in a stage now where we basically are having all this debate, whether it's Charlie Munger or it's Ray Dalio. Everyone's saying, listen, the dollar's going to go to zero, this and that, but they're giving absolutely no solution. You have Charlie Munger, who sounds like he's telling everyone to buy a little bit of crypto just in case the dollar goes to zero. And then he says, oh, by the way, cryptocurrency is a venereal disease. So is that true? What is the history of cryptocurrency? I'm going to talk about that as well. Where did that come from? Because World War II not only had all these companies start investing out of fear of Voldemort, but, cars get better, but towards tanks, and we get really committed to the gas version of the car, and then we go throughout the 70s and really go up to these business cycles. Airplanes got better, but they kind of stalled out. You see where Boeing is now, and this duopoly that's not getting better. And then you look at computer chips that came around because of Turing during that time. You had the Enigma code that the Germans had, and then you had computers crack the Enigma code. Information is the game today, isn't it, people? You see throughout 2020, you see the trades, but the dark pool trades you can't really see. You can't really see what's happening. I mean, Congress certainly could, but they're all paid by the same corporations on both sides. You read the books of these guys, they say, stake both politicians, stake all sides of everything, and you never lose, right? And that's the game, isn't it? But if we're talking about what is a free market economy, everyone can buy every single asset, that's not the case, right? You think about an NFL team. These guys are saying that an MLB team is below market for returns. Yeah, that's because they're not like selling baseball cards, making NFTs, making good video games out of all this stuff and profit maximizing, because they share all of the revenue through the league with the players. So what is the incentive? To have all of the equity private and outside of the system. That's where these guys are getting rich. Stevie Cohen doesn't own the Mets because he's going to get a return cash flow wise from the ticket sales and the players with those budgets. His investment is he's never going to be poor as long as he runs the Mets. I mean, that's like the sustainability of that. But he also can run business through every single game. You have clients come through, and do the players get any of that? Of course not. Any single deal that the player signs, their agent gets a cut. But these players are agents for Stevie Cohen's deals, and he has no problem insider trading. Go watch Stevie Cohen's videos about insider trading. And honestly, I believe him. I understand where he's coming from. It's an insider game. But what we have to do is fix the game. It has to be on the blockchain, right? So that if you have insider information, you can drop it, the public can see it, instead of you dropping it to CNBC, McKinsey, so-and-so through the wire, secret sources for everything. And I don't even want to get into the censorship, the psychological operations that our government is doing right now. They release the old documents on shit they've done in the past just to justify the fact that they're doing it multiples worse today. Richard Nixon, Trump will go off and make this all about him. Everyone's being spied on. Every single person is being spied on. I'm in my live streams on TikTok, and I have Facebook employees coming in, banning me. I'm talking about BlackRock videos. Those videos get banned. Why are those videos getting banned? When I'm talking about the relationships, incentives of banks, why can't I speak about that? So they're going to ban me permanently on TikTok? So I can't provide any financial education to anyone? So I can't have a career? These are the digital railroads of our future. Facebook is already saying they're calling themselves a metaverse, but it awfully seems like they're trying to make these their stores. And if these are their stores and we're all spending all of our time in their stores, then they absolutely are monopolies. I can bring you down antitrust history, but let's talk about the history of this country. What is it founded on? We had some pretty good ideas. During that time in England, you have to understand, the Prussians, the English, the Russians, the French, all of them, they were acting nuts out of their mind. Finally, people came over to the free world. There's Puritans in the Northeast that were way more hardcore. There was people in Virginia that was probably like normal. There's plenty of different types of people in the United States. And the idea was that we're all going to be different. We're going to set up a system that resembles anarchy with rules, basically, with some sort of syndicate. That was what our country was actually founded on. It wasn't supposed to be this big brother top-down economy. There was supposed to be one guy, and according to Andrew Jackson, that guy was supposed to be above all, which I do agree with, because we do need an executive to run. You saw it through the Romans. I mean, being a dictator is no fun. Go look at the Romans. There was periods where they had like 50 Caesars in the period of like 50 years. People hardly last when they're trying to be that powerful. But we do need an executive branch. And we need to be able to vote the right executive branch in that's not in this deep state system. We have not taken the power away from the war economy since World War II. Anyone that's tried has been canceled, killed, dropped, whatever. It is outrageous. So let's really talk about where this went wrong. Alexander Hamilton. You saw that Hamilton video. Everyone's talking about how great that Hamilton play was. Why are they worshiping Hamilton? Why are they worshiping Fauci? Why are they doing all this stuff? Why is the narrative set? Why is the Jerome Powell documentary and biography coming out now when the story is just turning to the part where you see the data come true? They're trying to corrupt the data on the Fed rates because they've already made this decision, guys. I'll talk about 2008, 2020 when it got even worse and what Goldman Sachs and BlackRock are buying us into fiscally and monetarily wise. I'll tell you that. But let's start with centralization. We had two banks of the United States that were essentially created by Hamilton. The third one was created with the ideas of the first one, but the third one in 1913 was the final act, but they were discussing it by 1910 in Jekyll Island. It was after the 1907 bank panic that it became a topic of discussion that was bigger. But the 1880s, the Gilded Ages, were where all of this wealth go to the oil companies, the railroads, everything. That's what we're dealing with right now, people. If you don't think that Amazon, Facebook, all of this stuff, they are essentially utilities. They're getting advanced. I mean, Facebook hasn't changed at all besides TikTok, right? But the railroads, Vanderbilt, Rockefeller, all those guys, they cleared ground. They totally cleared ground and changed things when they were setting up the monopolies. As soon as they set up the monopolies, they stopped changing, though. And they get worse. And they raise prices. And they control the politicians, right? Happens every single time. We're in the second Gilded Age. It's the digital Gilded Age. Data is the new oil. I mean, it's just right there, people. It's just right there. The Jacksonian democracy, where they would have distributed the financial centers instead of having one centralized exchange in New York, like we have basically. We have Chicago for commodities. I can't tell you how important it is to spread out the watering holes in an economy. God would have wanted us to build a system that resembles nature. We have 50 states. We need to worry about our country, realize that our country was best when we were not involved with everyone else's politics. They could bring over their ideas here and we would have a melting pot. But it needs to be distributed. The melting pot is not just shoving everyone on subways in New York City. That is not the way that this works. We are humans. Read Lorenz if you're interested in thinking about cities and how poorly designed they are for the way that society is supposed to be in a healthy way. We're having people be 40, 35 before they even can consider kids. That's not the right step. The CEO of Twitter is 37 and he's taking a marital leave at 37. What is natural? He should have had those kids when he was 25 probably. If we're really talking about what is natural, those kids should be, at the age where he can learn from his kids at this point, and he's just having kids now at 37 as the CEO of getting it from another young CEO. These are young guys who haven't had kids yet, right? But what does that do to the average 20-year-old? You see Dave Portnoy get attacked for going after 20-year-olds, but I know just as many hedge fund managers that cheat on their wives and go after 20-year-olds. Why is only Dave Portnoy attacked? Where's the narrative? Who's the incentive? Who's controlling this stuff? And when you see admissions and investigations start, why is the admission only that? Whenever you hear an admission and they throw the sell side like they're doing Morgan Stanley right now under the bus for the Archegos incident, just know the buy side's doing it. Buy side's throwing them under the bus. So we had the Civil War after Jackson, to go back to that. Why was that? Of course it was because of slavery. Slavery was the Southerners' economy. They actually had to pick the cotton. Somehow, some way. They didn't consider their labor to be human. But they didn't consider money printing in New York and lending it out to England or whatever else that wants to start a colony and getting money back, or lending it out to New Yorkers with a federal dollar. They didn't think that was fair. So we had the Civil War. I mean, if you want to go back to 1812, that was the Napoleon equation, right? Napoleon is really about the financial system. During our Civil War, after Napoleon in Europe, Marx comes out. Now you have Marx and Engels. Nobody really listens to them. In fact, all those communists pretty much get killed until 1880, and Bismarck has this kick-ass economy under this kick-ass army. It's literally kicking everyone's ass. And he's like, you know what, we can afford some education, some social programs. The problem with that, everyone else wants social programs. England didn't want to do that. You kidding? French didn't want to do that. Nobody wanted to do that. Nobody wants to actually give money to the people. Once you're like a revolutionist, like you think you're an elite, at the end of the day, you become an elitist, right? So it's about understanding that there's going to be corruption. Like if you think about communism, even at the end of communism, we're like, oh, by the way, there's going to have to be central planners. And by the way, that chapter of central planners is basically what our central banks do. But in communism, there's no game theory. There's no competition. All labor is considered equal. There's no negotiation. You are what the system tells you to be. That's why winners like Stalin go up to the top. And then for the people that didn't like get the power, it's not a really good time, is it? When winners get control of a system that's as dominating as communism or fascism, which is on the same side of the coin, by the way. Same side of the coin. The justification is just a little bit different. So that's basically where we are. We're here. Well, not quite. Let's talk about World War I. Why did World War I happen? Because of the Federal Reserve, Third Federal Reserve. Why did World War II happen? Because of the Versailles Treaty, because of the Roaring Twenties and the Federal Reserve. That popped. Immediately 5 million people are starving in Ukraine. Budgetary decisions were made in a global economy. Stalin made choices. But you can't add up the whole system if you're just talking about, you know, the economy. Everyone likes to look at the S&P 500 over time. What about everything else? What was happening to the rest of the global economy when everyone's looking at these statistics over time? I don't know. All we really have is interest rates, rents in England that we look at. We look at because England has like the best rent indications. So centralization, people. Yeah, if we just distribute the watering holes a little bit, maybe we don't have to have these world wars. And as somebody who lost and has the family history that I do, where my grandfather came over to this country with his mom, and the rest of the family didn't make it. They bought out with diamonds in order to just get out. They had to give all the diamonds that they were dealing in Vienna. So I understand the value of these digital cryptocurrencies, the value of Bitcoin, the value of Ethereum, all this stuff that you can transport and you can get out of a fascist communist system or communist system. I mean, the fact that the Biden administration is now going to rule next week about it, what do you think the regulation is really trying to do? You really think it's about money laundering? The US dollar, the way it's set up, is designed to money launder. It's not about money laundering. It is ultimately about control. We have to decide what kind of economy we want, what kind of society we want. Do we want these digital oil companies that are mining our data? Do we want them to be monopolies and own our data? Do we want them to be able to just turn off power to our house whenever they want, like TikTok just did to me? Why? I don't even want to talk about honestly what I was saying, but I have facts for every single thing I was saying. And if you don't realize, actually I will tell you exactly what I was saying. If you don't realize the evolution of what communism has turned into, when Lenin wrote What Is to Be Done, and he was asking for economic terrorism, You don't see that? You don't see that today? You don't see that come out today? I'll leave you with that thought. I hope to spread these ideas and not be restricted. If you think that I'm onto something, or at least I should be given a platform, I really appreciate that. I really do. Because ultimately, the only way, I don't care if people think I'm wrong, I'll cite everything that I say. But the fact that we can't discuss these things and we can't actually think about the root of the issues, when I was going home, when I was 6 years old, from my private school on the Upper East Side, and I see the towers, smoke go down, I get home, my parents are kind of telling me, not really, but I'm flicking the channel. Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, nothing, everything has its towers. I remember rooting for a war. Yeah! I was like 7 or 8 by the time we finally got there. 8, 9. I started looking at CPI prints on the housing market when I was 10. I was telling my dad, oh, what's going on here, Dad? Well, son, we're getting short. And he got squeezed out for a year of his hedge fund because the word was literally out on the street in 2007. Goldman Sachs fired everyone, parachuted them out. Every single person. Never is there accountability. We set up the problem so it was only worse at the 2020 lows, and now they're getting austere. So, yeah. If you think that I should be allowed to speak, then thanks. Please share this. Really love it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this.